My father's face went completely white the moment my brother walked into that courtroom. I had never seen that before. Not once in 34 years. Patrick Gallagher was the kind of man who never looked surprised. Truck drivers yelled at him. Bankers threatened him. Once a warehouse roof collapsed during a storm and he just stood there, hands in his pockets, like it was a minor inconvenience. But that morning, the color just drained out of him. I swear it was like watching someone pull a plug. The courtroom was quiet except for the buzz of the overhead lights. That thin electric hum that gets into your head if you sit there too long. My mother leaned forward in her chair. "Connor," she whispered, across the aisle. Their attorney looked confused. He flipped through his folder like maybe he had missed something. My lawyer hadn't moved. She just stood there calmly and said, "Your Honor, the defense calls one final witness." That was the moment everything shifted. You ever watch a room realize something at the same time? No one says anything, but everyone feels it. My brother walked past my parents without stopping. Didn't even look at them. He headed straight for the witness stand like he had already made peace with whatever was about to happen next. "My name is Megan Gallagher. I am 34 years old. And until that morning in court, I thought I understood exactly how loyalty worked in my family. I was wrong." Connor sat in the witness chair without looking at my parents. My father leaned forward. "Connor, what the hell are you doing?" Connor didn't answer. The judge told everyone to keep their voices down, but my father kept staring at him like the whole thing had to be some kind of mistake. Seeing that look on his face almost broke me, because a few months earlier none of this felt possible. Gallagher Freight was the center of our family. My father built it from almost nothing, and he never let us forget that. 2 trucks, he'd say, tapping the kitchen table. 2 trucks and a rented yard. That's how this started. Connor would usually be sitting across from him. Dad would point at him and smile. "One day this place will be yours." He said that more than once over the years. He never said it to me. I handled payroll, driver checks, fuel reimbursements, vendor invoices, the quiet work that kept 12 trucks moving every week. My salary was $72,000 a year. Connor ran operations, drivers, routes, repairs. Dad made the decisions. According to the internal records, the company brought in about $1,300,000 a year, but the number my parents filed with the court was very different. $450,000. The first time my lawyer read that number during a meeting, I laughed before I could stop myself. Dad looked straight at me. "Something funny?" "No," I said. That was the moment I understood they weren't just removing me from the company. They were changing the numbers that defined it. The first thing that felt wrong wasn't dramatic. It was just a number sitting in the middle of a spreadsheet. $48,000. Transferred from Gallagher Freight operating accounts. Destination Red Mesa Holdings. I stared at it for a long minute. Honestly, I thought maybe I'd entered something wrong. Later that afternoon, I walked into my father's office. The place smelled faintly like diesel drifting in from the yard. "Dad," I said, turning the laptop toward him, "what's Red Mesa?" He barely looked at the screen. "Equipment lease," he said. "For what equipment?" He shrugged. "Fleet upgrade stuff. Connor knows about it." Connor didn't know about it. I checked with him that night while we were closing up. "Red Mesa," he said. "Never heard of it." That's when my stomach dropped a little. Back at my desk, I kept digging. Another transfer. $52,000, then $61,000, then $39,000. Each one going to the same company, Red Mesa Holdings. By the end of the week, the total sitting in that column was $312,000. The next morning, I walked into my father's office again. "This isn't equipment," I said quietly. He leaned back in his chair. "You're looking too hard at numbers that don't concern you anymore." A few days later, I stayed late finishing payroll reports. Most of the office had already emptied out. The hallway smelled faintly like burnt coffee from the break room. I was packing my laptop when I heard voices from the conference room. My father, My mother. And their attorney, Douglas Pierce. I wasn't trying to listen. But then I heard my name. Pierce was speaking first. If the valuation stands, the court will likely accept it. My father said, $450,000 is more than fair. My mother added quietly, Megan never ran the business anyway. She handled paperwork. I stood in the hallway with my bag in my hand. Not moving, Pierce said. If she challenges the numbers, we'll ask what experience she has managing the company. My father gave a small laugh. Exactly. She processed payroll. Connor runs the operation. My mother said, Connor will take over eventually. That's always been the plan. Pierce paused. And Connor understands that my father answered immediately. He understands where his future comes from. Something in my chest tightened when I heard that. Because in that moment I realized this wasn't just about pushing me out of the company. They were already rewriting my role in it, and in their version of the story. I had never mattered very much at all. My father called me into his office the following Monday. Connor was already there, sitting against the wall, arms folded. That alone told me something was wrong. Dad didn't waste time. We're restructuring the financial side of the company, he said. I stayed standing. What does that mean? It means payroll and accounting are being consolidated. With who? With an outside firm. I laughed a little before I could stop myself. You're outsourcing the entire system I built. Dad's voice stayed calm. You built a system. You didn't build the company. Connor shifted in his chair but still didn't say anything. I looked at him. You knew about this. He rubbed the back of his neck. Meg. Dad cut him off. Connor doesn't make these decisions. I turned back to Dad. So what happens to me? He slid a thin folder across the desk. Severance. I opened it. 3 months of pay. $21,600. That's it, I said quietly. You'll land somewhere else. He said, You're good with numbers. I looked around the office. The faint smell of diesel drifted through the window from the yard. 12 trucks outside. 8 years of my work inside those books. Connor finally spoke. Dad. Maybe we should. Dad raised a hand. We're done discussing it. And just like that, I wasn't part of the company anymore. 2 weeks after my father fired me, I sat across from Sarah Whitaker in her office downtown. The room smelled faintly like printer ink and old paper. I slid a stack of folders across the desk. Payroll summaries, vendor records, bank transfer logs I'd exported before they locked me out of the system. Sarah opened the first folder and started reading. You kept copies of everything, she said. Accounting habit. I told her. If numbers move, I like to know where they went. She stopped on one page and tapped the column. Red Mesa Holdings. $312,000. I said. She read the transfers again, slower this time. Your parents filed a company valuation of $450,000. That's the number they gave the court. But these internal records show the company clearing around $1,300,000 annually. That's what the real books say. Sarah leaned back and crossed her arms. That gap doesn't happen by accident. Then what is it? Either they're hiding revenue, she said, or they're moving money somewhere else. I nodded toward the transfer log, Red Mesa. She flipped to the bank pages. We'll subpoena the company bank accounts, she said, and the Red Mesa accounts if we can tie them together. Will that prove it? It proves money moved, but not why. She closed the folder and looked at me carefully. For that, we need someone inside the company to explain the intent. You mean a witness? Yes. I already knew where she was going. Dad controls the books now, I said, and your mother supports him. Right. Sarah didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, That leaves Connor. I shook my head. Connor's getting the company. Dad promised him that. Sarah slid the folder back toward me. Sometimes people change their minds when they finally see the numbers. At that point, I didn't believe that for a second. Connor called me 3 nights before the hearing. I almost didn't answer. The phone buzzed against my kitchen counter next to a mug that still smelled faintly like burnt coffee. I picked it up. "Hey," he said. His voice sounded tired. "Hey." For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then Connor said, "Dad told me you're moving forward with the case." "I am." "You know what that does to the company." I leaned against the counter. "The company?" I said. "Or Dad's version of it." Connor sighed. "You always assume the worst. $312,000 moved into a company no one can explain. That's Dad handling finances." "No," I said quietly. "It's hiding money." Connor didn't answer right away. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "Dad says if this goes to court, things could get ugly for you." "What does that mean?" "He thinks the court might question your payroll system." "You mean he's planning to blame me?" Connor exhaled slowly. "He said there were irregularities." "That system is transparent," I said. "You've used it, I know, and you've seen the ledgers." "I have." There was another long pause. Finally, Connor spoke again. "I checked the transfers you mentioned, and they're real." My grip tightened around the phone. "You found Red Mesa." "Yeah." "And the account?" "Yes." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, Connor said something very quietly. "Meg, Dad didn't just move the money." "What do you mean?" "He moved it right after your valuation report was finished." The silence after that felt heavier than anything he'd said before. When Connor finally spoke again, his voice sounded different. "I'm not sure I can stay out of this." Connor raised his right hand and took the oath like he was clocking in for a shift. My father leaned forward in his chair. "Connor," he said quietly, "you don't have to do this." Connor kept his eyes on the judge. My lawyer stepped closer to the witness stand. "Please state your name for the record." "Connor Gallagher." "And your role at Gallagher Freight, I oversee operations." "How long have you worked there? 10 years? She opened a folder and placed several pages in front of him. "Mr. Gallagher, before this hearing, did you review the company's internal transfer records?" "Yes." "And how did you obtain them?" "I accessed archived ledgers and bank confirmations stored in our internal system." My father's lawyer stood up quickly. "Your Honor, we object. These documents were not produced by my client." The judge looked over the papers. "They were submitted during discovery this week." She said, "Objection overruled." Connor turned to the first page. Over a 12-month period, $312,000 was transferred from Gallagher Freight accounts to Red Mesa Holdings. My father spoke from across the room. "That's equipment leasing." Connor looked at him then. "No, it's not." The courtroom went quiet. My lawyer continued. "Mr. Gallagher, who controls Red Mesa Holdings, my father. And what happened to those funds? They were moved off the company books after the valuation report was prepared." The judge leaned forward slightly. "You're saying the transfers occurred after the company's valuation was calculated?" "Yes." My lawyer asked one more question. "Based on the internal financial records, what is the approximate annual revenue of Gallagher Freight?" Connor turned another page. "About $1,300,000. My father didn't say anything after that. He just sat there while the numbers he'd tried to hide were read out loud in front of the court. The courtroom stayed quiet for a long moment after Connor finished speaking. My father sat frozen in his chair. My mother leaned toward their attorney, Douglas Pierce, whispering quickly, but Pierce looked less certain than he had all morning. The judge reviewed the documents Connor had submitted. Pages slid slowly across the bench. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Gallagher," she said to my father, "these transfers raise serious concerns." Pierce stood. "Your Honor, the company maintains these payments were operational." The judge lifted a hand. $312,000 transferred into a separate entity controlled by the owner requires explanation. My father tried to speak. "That money was for you will have the opportunity to address that during the financial review." The judge said calmly. Then she continued, This court is ordering an immediate freeze of the Red Mesa Holdings accounts pending further investigation. My father stared at the bench. The judge went on. A forensic accounting review of Gallagher Freight will begin immediately. During that period, the court is appointing temporary financial oversight. She glanced toward our table. Megan Gallagher will be granted full access to the company's financial records and operational reporting. Then she looked at Connor. Mr. Connor Gallagher will remain responsible for operational management. My father finally spoke. So you're taking the company away from me? The judge closed the file. No, Mr. Gallagher. I'm making sure the company's numbers are examined honestly before anyone claims control. 3 months later, the trucks were still running. Connor stood beside me in the warehouse office one evening, turning a set of old keys in his hand. Outside, one of the engines started and rolled slowly toward the highway. He set the keys on the desk. Dad carried these everywhere. He said, I remember. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Connor rubbed his forehead. He still won't talk to me. He won't talk to me either. Connor leaned against the desk. You ever think about just walking away from all this? Sometimes, I said, but the company was never really the problem. What was the way people decided who mattered? Connor nodded slowly. We're cleaning up the accounts next week, he said. No more outside shells. Everything stays on the books. That's how it should have been from the start. He headed for the door, then paused. You're really running the financial side now. Someone has to. After he left, I sat there a while with those keys on the desk. Here's the truth I figured out through all this. Money doesn't break families. Secrets do. If you ever end up in a situation like this, don't wait until everything explodes before you look closely at the numbers, because sometimes the numbers are the only honest thing left in the room.